call is now being recorded.
Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from yourblackworld.com. I'm on the road right now, and I got a call that led me to want to do an interview to allow people to hear about a situation that's occurring at Northwestern University. There's a student named Timothy McNair. He's a master's student at Northwestern. He's an extraordinary singer. I'll let him give you more of his background, but the reason that Timothy got my attention is because Timothy was effectively booted out of a very important class that he was taking at Northwestern. And I want to say even booted out of the program because he refused to perform a song that had been written by a man who was a known racist, who had serious problems with black people. And because Timothy took that stand, he was given a failing grade, and there were a lot of other repercussions that could really derail his career. He's a very good student, and I don't think he deserved this. And so I wanted to interview Timothy to allow him to tell his story in his own words so you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And I have Mr. McNair on the line. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing wonderful, Boyce. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, very well. Now, I spoke to you for about 20 minutes before we did this interview, and I got everything that I could get from it, and I mentioned what I know about your situation, but I want people to know you in a more direct sense. Let's start with your academic background. You're a very good. I've reduced you to a singer, but I think you do a lot more than that. And so, can you tell us what you're good at and why you were given some of the biggest scholarships that a person in your field could ever obtain?
Well, I have always had a music aptitude, not necessarily in singing. That didn't come across till much later in life, and not as early as many others who studied music. But I am a operatic bass, and also I do concert singing, so oratorio and lieder and art song, and even a little bit of music theater. And I was noticed early on that I had a very unique quality at my instrument, and being an operatic bass, a true bass is the rarest voice types when we're discussing operatic voice types and what Germans would call a Fach, which is a voice type. And because of that rareness and because of the qualities in my voice that were flexible and the size and the timbre, the color of the sound, and my acting ability and communication as an artist that is still growing and developing, people really wanted to support me in being an opera singer, and part of that came by receiving a lot of major scholarships across from undergraduate into a master's degree at Northwestern, where I'm on the largest scholarship, the full scholarship at Northwestern's being in School of Music.
Wow. Okay. So, and I'm glad you got a chance to describe, what you do and who you are, because I'm certainly not an expert in that field, and I didn't want to in any way minimize your achievements. I think it should be made clear to people that you are accomplished in your field, especially for your age. Now, let's move forward to what happened in this class. Can you tell us what happened and why you refused to perform the song and what the response of the professor was at the university? I mean, just feel free to tell the story in your words and take your time.
Certainly. Well, as has been portrayed on WGN, your Black Blue Dog, your Blackboard.net, and lots of other outlets. There's hundreds of blogs of me on it now, and I'm all over the internet with the situation. But Professor Donald Nally, who's the head of choral activities here at Northwestern's Beanin School of Music, programmed the end-of-the-year concert for June 8th. And I got the music for this end-of-the-year concert after our first concert of this quarter. Of course, Northwestern, we're on quarter system, so we have a fall quarter, winter quarter, and a spring quarter. So we're in the spring quarter. After completing a concert already for the spring quarter, I received this music and saw that one of the pieces was titled A Song for Democracy. And the poetry was interestingly enough set by Walt Whitman, who is considered to be, of course, a founding father, quotation mark, of American poetry in whatever sense that means. And I was quite taken aback that we would have something called a Song of Democracy when the actual poem that Walt Whitman wrote was written for a school, and it was written for a school in New Jersey, and of course during that time we were not integrated schools. So his idea of a democracy, and as communicated in way more than that poem and other poems, did not include African Americans. In fact, he had said things as if we should be wiped from the face of the planet and taken out of the United States of America. So I addressed the professor and said that I refused to perform that piece, but that I would perform the other two pieces, because there were three pieces for this concert taking place on June 8th. And I said, okay, because of this reason, and I explained it very diplomatically and logically, I just feel that I will not perform this piece. However, I can do the other two pieces, but just the third one I'll sit it out and I won't do it. Well, without an email coming back to me showing any regard or consideration of my perspective from him, this white professor, decided to send me back an email with a certain degree of shortness and brevity, stating that I needed to actually perform that piece, and that if I did not perform the piece, I would receive an F for the class, and that I was not to attend class, and I would be barred from class. And this was the continual lingo and vocabulary of all these emails. So anyways, I ended up, having email correspondence with him again, sort of a little back and forth. The dean was CC'd, and then I CC'd some multicultural affairs people who did not respond. And needless to say, I was pulled out of class on Wednesday, May 15th, and the actual class, and sent to the dean's office, upon which there was a man standing in a suit who would not reveal himself. We'd know that was university counsel. And the professor says, you do not want to perform this Walt Whitman piece, and even though you went from the other two, you realize that I don't want you. It's not that I don't want you, and he stuttered. He says, you cannot be in class. And I said, well, of course, if it were not about you, then I'll be in the class, because if you want to be in the class, I'll be in the class. So you're the only person deciding this, not me. So I then was, sort of in a little communication altercation with him in terms of him, saying that you must report a piece, you'll get thrown out the class. And so I said that I was done with that meeting, especially if the man in the suit was not going to identify himself by name. And I asked the man in the suit standing in the corner, who we know is university counsel, I said, who are you? You're standing in this room listening to sensitive information. And I asked him twice, who are you? He did not identify himself. Then he opened the door and said, please, and gestured me out of the office, and then I left. And so I was sent another email by the professor saying, of course, you are barred from this class, and you will receive a failing grade if you do not sing all the pieces, which included the Walt Whitman piece. And that went up to WGN-TV and all these blogs, and it's a really showing the state of affairs in formal education and the racism therein.
So, failing this class, what are the consequences for you for getting a failing grade on this class?
The consequence in getting a failing grade in this class is that, of course, there is an infraction on my transcript. And a grade infraction that actually is not consistent with the other A's I've made in this class. I made nothing but A's in this class for the past 2 quarters, because you have to take university credit for the entire year for the first year of a master's degree in music. And I've received nothing but 4.0s in this class. And then I completed a concert this quarter already. So this was one of 2 concerts that I'm not going to be on. And so even though I've done all that good work, I would then get an F, which would, of course, drop my GPA. And then there is a high possibility of probationary status, if not and up to losing my full scholarship that I was offered and accepted upon coming to this university.
Wow. So effectively, it sounds like you took a stand and you were labeled a bad Negro in the eyes of your superiors, right? And I understand that. I understand that. When I was working on my PhD at Ohio State University, there was a scholar that came through from Stanford who was very well respected, and he gave a presentation, and he involved people of color in his statistical model, and the fact was the guy was wrong. I mean, he was a big shot from Stanford. He was a brilliant guy, but he was wrong, and I explained to him why he was wrong, and I told him what was wrong with his methodology. And I was especially sensitive to it because it involved people of color. I mean, finance is just an incredibly white male-dominated field, and they rarely talk about black people. So, this was an odd occasion. I was the only black man in the room, and I didn't want to speak up because, I was a graduate student, and in that program, graduate students aren't supposed to speak. But I couldn't, I didn't want to be the representative for all black people, but I had to be at that time. And so by my simply correcting him, I then went from being labeled an extraordinary student to being labeled a bad student. My evaluations went from outstanding to basically saying he's a problem child. He needs to learn how to keep his mouth shut. And I remember going into a protest where I simply told my chairman, I said, if you as a black man cannot be respected in this department, then I will not attend another research seminar for the rest of the year that I'm here. And that was a big deal because we were required to go to the seminars. And I almost didn't graduate because then, and what's funny is, and this is probably what makes me sensitive to your situation, is that if a black professor had not stood up for me, and his name was W.C. Benton, if he hadn't stood up for me, I wouldn't be Dr. Boyce Watkins right now. I would be Boyce Watkins, the guy who almost got a PhD. And so, what's interesting to me about this is that, this happens a lot in a lot of departments across the country. The struggles of racism in the workplace or in academia, they affect everybody. It doesn't just affect brothers in the street. It affects the brothers in the universities and the sisters that are in corporate America, all of us. And what I find most interesting here as well is that these people in the you said that there is you said multicultural affairs department or an office of inclusion. And they haven't said a word about this? I mean, what are they saying about any of it?
They've said nothing. When I CC'd them on the email, I never got a response saying, I never got a response in particular from a couple of people that I CC'd saying, Timothy, we can meet with you and the professor. Let's actually have a meeting and a dialogue. They never said anything in regards to the situation, and it's sort of been brushed under the rug. I've really not received an advocacy from these people whose role is supposed to be, there was an office established, one of the people to actually facilitate encouraging more inclusion on this campus, which has had such a racist history. Even the last year alone is enough to cap it all. We had a janitor who walked into his office here at Northwestern named Michael Collins that you can easily look up, and he found a teddy bear with a noose around its neck in his office. And so that was, settled out of court from what I've been told by several agencies. And there was a protest on campus, 3 months ago about that. And the school, when he contacted and told him about the situation, he got a one-sentence email from the president saying, basically, this shouldn't happen, but he never got a real apology. And this man walked to his office and found a teddy bear with a noose around his neck in his office. He's the only African-American maintenance worker in that position at Northwestern, so he's no longer working here, understandably. But it definitely grew up into a huge protest by students. So these people in these offices at the university in multicultural affairs and inclusion and all, it seems that they are limited within their positions because while they're in that function, they are hired by a status quo, predominantly a bunch of old white men, and these men do not have the sensitivity to the situation that we do because they don't live the life that we do. They don't have the experience that we do. So even if they try to intellectualize it and make it academic, which is often all that people do in institutions that we make intellectual emotions, which really need to be felt, not made intellectualized, then these people can't really serve their roles at the university. So the multicultural affairs officers gave me no response.
Well, I find that interesting because I just spoke with someone at the University of Kentucky, and that's their frustration as well. They have all these issues with racism. They have so much clearly documented, undeniable, institutionalized racism. They have departments that haven't hired a person of color in 20 years, and the people in the multicultural affairs departments, they're like just pieces of paper on the wall. They don't really exist. They're absolutely voiceless. They're paper tigers. They have no authority. They have no backbone, and they just allow this racism to continue to exist. It happens all over the country. And Now, I want to ask you a question about your department, Timothy. How many faculty teach in your department, approximately?
In my department alone, there are about, if I'm counting, about 8 to 10 faculty members in my department.
How many of those faculty members are African American?
0.
And
it's an all-white voice department.
I wonder if that department had 0 white males or 0 white people, if they would consider that to be a little bit of a problem. If someone would actually consider that to be an issue. And my point here is that that's not unusual. In fact, I knew the answer to your question before I even asked the question, because if you go around the country and you look at nearly every predominantly white university across the nation, even these so-called elite universities like Northwestern, you'll see that people of color are excluded from these positions. And what's interesting to me is that when you ask them, well, why are there no people of color in this department, they'll come up with some answer that really perpetuates the myth of white supremacy. They'll say something like, well, we try to recruit people of color for this job, but we can't find any qualified minorities for the position. And what that is, that statement is an insult to every qualified black person who has applied for that job. Even someone as talented as you. You know, again, this is important to have this conversation because people will perpetuate this myth that the reason that black men like you or even myself, that the reason that people like us don't get opportunities like that is because we're lazy, we're thugs. We just want to hang out on the corner and drink beer all day. And no, this is not true. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of very talented, very hardworking African-American men and women who are applying for these opportunities who are being sent away because of the color of their skin. When you go to Harvard Law School, it took Harvard Law School over 200 years to give tenure to a single black woman. And to this day, they've only given tenure to 2. They gave tenure to Nolani Guarnier in 1998, and then when we were made to tell about Elena Kagan on the Supreme Court, because she hadn't hired a single person of color in 6 years. She hired 35 people, none of them were black. When we were to tell about that, they suddenly miraculously found a black person that they gave tenure to. So it was literally the second black female in the entire history of Harvard Law School to get that opportunity. So at the end of the day, the conclusions go in one of 2 directions. Either you have a clear problem with racial discrimination, or no black person on the planet is qualified to this job that's been done by thousands or hundreds of white men, depending on what university you're talking about. So I think that your stand is very important. I think that you should continue with this stand. I'm going to reach out to Reverend Jesse Jackson and see what he's got going on in his schedule, because I really think that this is something that needs to be brought to the fore. I think that the names of the individuals in the Multicultural Affairs Department, those names need to be made public. We need to talk about these individuals who are sitting there and allowing this kind of thing to happen, this kind of hatred to exist, and not speaking up about it. Because it's not as if anyone can argue in their right mind that you don't have a right to do what you're doing right now. They don't have a leg to stand on. They cannot legitimately or logically say that you don't have a right to be offended by the idea of having to perform and celebrate for a man who wanted you and your family to die. This man hated black people, so why in the hell, excuse my French, but why in the hell would they expect you to go out and glorify his name? That's sick. That's like asking Jews to sing about Hitler, and you should not do that. So I'm glad that you're telling this story. I'm glad you took this stand, and I'm going to help you on this. So what I would like to do is I would like to encourage everyone listening to support Timothy, not because it's not a matter of just supporting one person getting one degree from one school. It's much bigger than one person. It's really about sort of taking the stand and highlighting this insidious discrimination that has been allowed to exist. And all those liberals over at Northwestern University, all those people who claim to care about the black experience, care about equality, and all these other things that they want credit for, this is your opportunity. this is your opportunity to either walk away, as a coward, or, from something that you clearly know is wrong, or your opportunity to make an excuse, or it's an opportunity for you to actually do the right thing. Because I don't think anybody can deny the fact that you've earned the right to be there and that you're not extraordinary in what you do. So I'm going to let you get the last word on this. How have people been receiving the message so far? Where do things stand now? What are some of the next steps that you have in mind?
Well, in terms of people receiving the message, I have received some slights from colleagues. I actually received a cyber bullying email, a cyber stalking and harassing email that had to be referred to campus police and is now being handled by student conduct, where a white colleague of mine decided to send me a harassing email with name calling and saying if I were foolish enough to come back to Northwestern for my final year of my master's degree, which will be next year, that he wished me the best of luck, and he was trying to incite this sort of dialogue between the two of us. He wanted me to respond to him, and which I didn't. But I've received that, and of course I've had colleagues going on the internet and public saying things like, I have not made A's in that class, even though, Dr. Boyce Watkins, you have my transcript on file, as does NAACP, as does WGN, and you all can vouch for the fact that I've made nothing but A's in this class. And so I've had people trying to say that I'm lazy, and so the actual racism coming out of it, where these white colleagues of mine, quite a few of them have said they're liberal, are actually saying I'm lazy and that, I'm not a good student, even though I have a 3.750 and I've made an A's in this class. So what they're saying and what's on paper doesn't really add up. Finally, a good point is that we should be careful as people of color and people even not of color who are listening to this to make sure that we never try to overshadow the hatred of a person's lived life, such as Walt Whitman, this poet, or anyone who's a supposed founding father in any area of our country, whether it be literature, politics, finance, anything, and say that because of what they contributed, they are somehow not that bad of a person, or to say that they were just a man of their time. Because if we say that they were just a man of their time and that everybody was racist then, we are then diminishing things like the Circle of Brothers, who were men of their time, became the KKK. We're diminishing Nazis and Hitler. We're saying that they were men of their time. So let's not ever say that a person was a man of their time, because men of their time, even though they were men of their time were still embraced in Aryanism, Nordicism, Nazism, racism, rape, and the list goes on. And so we have to fully say that, yes, this man was a poet, maybe a great poet to some, but that to all, he was clearly a racist.
Well, I think you said it very well, and whether they were men of their time or not, they should be celebrated in this time. And I think that for those who choose, you could have just as easily as a black man chosen to go ahead and overlook that and sing the song, and I don't think anybody would blame you for it, but I don't think anybody can blame you for finding inoffensive that you are asked to celebrate someone who